Yeah.
All right. Thanks for everyone who's joining us watching the live stream. I'm here with Demotivator, and we're going to be talking tonight about, I guess just politics ourselves with and progressivism in general. So I guess perhaps Demotivator, do you want to introduce yourself or?
Yeah. We're just talking about whether we should use our real names or not, but I don't know. Just Tim is fine. And my name is Tim. I'm from New Zealand. I have a channel called Demotivator Opinion. I guess I would class myself as a progressive. And you've seen my channel a bit, right?
Oh yeah, I have. Yeah, I'm subscribed to a long time.
Yeah.
So.
And I've seen you leaving comments on my videos having issues with stuff that I think. So I guess it'd be a good opportunity.
I think I went on gun control, I kind of was hoping if you want to get into gun control at the end of this conversation, I think that might be fun. But for the most part, I'm more interested in just like general things like political correctness, feminism, stuff like that, right?
Sure.
I guess we could start with how we view ourselves politically. I'll just start off with myself. I call myself sort of a traditionalist. I'm a Catholic. I used to be a progressive earlier in college, and post some religious conversion, I sort of left that aside. I can get into the details of why I rejected it. But broadly, I don't know. I associate with a variety of political forces, but I'm not going to get too much into detail. I call myself a conservative. And you said, you can call me Dave, by the way.
Sweet.
But because everyone does. And I'm not doxing myself by telling people that. But I guess I was hoping to talk about things like what really your fight with people like Sargon of Akkad and the people who broadly term themselves the cultural libertarians, right? And I'm just curious about your opinion, what you think as being really like the fault lines in it. Sargon called, for instance, he calls himself a liberal, but would you consider him a liberal?
Well, he calls himself a classical liberal, which is kind of weird because classical liberalism is, back when liberalism was just sort of forming, and it was less like social liberalism. It was still very conservative in that sense, but they were just, what's the word? Like in terms of the economy and banking and, they were like, what's the word? Laissez-faire kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, liberalism was a history term just referring to, generally people who are focused on liberty politics.
Yeah, and economically liberal, for example.
But is Sargon economically liberal? Because he had a huge debate with this week with the Computing Forever guy, where Sargon was talking about how he wanted some form of wealth redistribution, and Computing Forever was like, this is a betrayal of everything, and you're a Marxist.
Who did who called him a Marxist? Did someone call Sargon a Marxist?
Yeah. It's this guy called Computing Forever, and he had this 2-hour video where he called it Sargonistic Marxism was what he called Sargon's philosophy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. Well, because
ostensibly
there's a difference between economically liberal and socially liberal, and he's for gay marriage and all that kind of shit, but
yes,
but I think he's very like free market capitalist when it comes to the economic side, and a classical liberal is not the same as a liberal today. Like it's more like Thomas Paine, I
think Sargon though. I think Sargon though does represent a certain class of people who would have probably been allied with the political left a decade or two ago, but are now increasingly becoming allied with the political right.
Well, I just think like as societies have modernized, social issues have come to the forefront, and that's created a big division between what would be classical liberalism and liberalism today. Because I think liberals today, would say, oh, we want religious freedom and we want, everyone to live together in this nice hippy-dippy paradise and love and whatever. But Sargon is I think more conservative in that sense. You know, he's always fear-mongering about the Muslims, and he he's always playing these games with like identity politics and everything, while accusing other people of playing with identity politics. Like,
well I mean, I guess this gets into my first thing here. I think Sargon's big problem is with identity politics having to do largely with things like feminism, things like
he's obsessed basically
with political correctness and feminism. Yeah. I've been a huge opponent of political correctness. So first of all, I guess first we start with feminism, right? I had a problem with this word. I don't call myself a feminist, but because I consider it to be sort of a functionally meaningless word.
What do you mean?
What?
Oh, what do you mean functionally?
It's functionally meaningless because I have no idea what it actually tells me about a person's opinions. So I come from a conservative Catholic community, and there's other Catholics who are more conservative than I am. And I know several girls there who think that birth control should be utterly illegalized, and they call themselves feminists.
Well, that just seems unusual. That seems outside. What? That seems outside the feminist mainstream to me.
Okay, great, but everybody calls themselves a feminist. So what meaning does it have, right?
I think that feminism in general, like if you look at any movement, even like conservatism, there's like overarching broad things that feminists believe in, and the overarching broad thing should be equality for women. But there's other people who they don't like the word feminism, so they call themselves egalitarians.
These women believe that they are for equality of women. They just think that birth control is, terrible and it should be totally illegal.
But do they identify with other feminists, like people who call themselves feminists? Like,
no,
do they hang out in feminist circles?
Other feminists don't go, right?
What's that? You cut off a bit.
Identify with them, so there you go.
Right, but I think if you don't feel any particular affinity to other people who call themselves feminists, it's going to be tricky to call yourself a feminist. It would be like, if there was a conservative guy who no other conservatives really had any affinity with, and he wasn't in any conservative circles, wouldn't the other conservatives be kind of like, but the other conservatives would be like, is he a conservative, or he's just a guy who calls himself conservative? He's not really with us,
Well, sure. So I think words should actually have meaning to them, right? They shouldn't just be sort of like symbols or signifiers. They should actually connotate something you're doing or trying to do, right?
Well, it should be equality for women, shouldn't
it? But everyone believes in that.
I know, but feminists will probably argue that making birth control illegal sets women back. So then it's
but she would argue that the existence of birth control sets women back. So there you go. I mean,
but then you could have studies and you could have conflicting
studies for what?
Well, how birth control impacts women, and I think it's shown like abstinence. I can't even say that word. Abstinence doesn't work. Your birth control is more effective if you believe in. But
what do you mean?
Sorry, you're a Catholic.
So it does work better.
Maybe you're not into that kind of thing.
I can tell you that for sure. You're saying that the education that only emphasizes abstinence has shown on median to be not as effective as education that is largely used in richer areas that uses birth control and abstinence. But that's not what's up for debate. The debate is the exist. I mean, first of all, I'm not going to argue someone else's opinions, but you could argue it just as well. You're just arguing whether X policy is better for society or not, right? And you could have totally divergent policy choices under the same banner of feminism, right? You're just making the argument that that's better for women or worse for women.
Well, yeah, but that would just be like a feminist would look at that and say, if you're trying to make birth control illegal, you're setting back women, so it's not.
But that's not feminists, they're both feminists because they both call themselves feminists and they both believe. You create a definition that includes everybody, though, right?
But if I called myself a conservative and then said I want to hike taxes on the rich, they'd be like, "That's not conservative." You know?
Okay. Well, no, I think there are conservatives who want to hike taxes. Conservative
Oh,
is not a
some.
really very conservative is not a very meaningful word either in some sense, right? I
But I
think
think
that,
we're
a
just arguing about
libertarian is a more
how,
meaningful word,
yeah, we're just
right?
arguing about like how terms are used, like what is and is not a feminist. Like you can say
I
that about what
suppose.
is and isn't a liberal, what is and isn't a conservative. What you can do it with like all of these different phrases. Really, you could say I'm not a feminist, I'm an egalitarian, and I believe like most of the stuff I believe is exactly the same as what feminists believe.
No, if
So,
I were to say I was an MRA, for instance, right?
hmm.
Other movements that I oppose,
There's some
but
decent
but
ones.
what?
Sort of. There's a few decent MRAs, but it's very rare.
Well, there's not as many decent. I've met as many decent MRAs as I've met decent feminists. So that should
Oh,
tell
like
you
two.
more or less my opinion of the movement, I guess. What?
Yeah, maybe. I don't
Well,
know.
I guess there's one big difference. When I say I've met about many decent MRAs as I have met decent feminists,
Yeah.
everyone calls themselves a feminist. So in that sense, I met a lot more decent feminists. I'm talking about people who are active in the feminist movement, people
Yeah.
who are active in the MRA movement. And so
Well, you
far,
talk
their tallies been
more about
about
that.
equal.
Well, true, but I think like obviously, and this is a super mundane statement that there's shitty people in all movements. It's just a matter of like how shitty the movement is, and I just think I don't think feminism is as shitty as people who say feminism is cancer. And there's some people who say that they're just like
Well, that's
feminism
Milo
is,
Yiannopoulos, right?
yeah, but I'm like, how can feminism be cancer? It's like it's not like Nazism or something. Like I think that's just really fucking over the top.
I didn't make that argument. You're saying Milo. That's obvious hyperbole, right?
Oh,
Like
I'm
no
not
one's
talking
supposed
about
to take
you.
that
I'm saying
seriously.
like, yeah, not you. I'm saying like,
They
some
mean that
people.
the feminist movement is a destructive movement. They feel that doesn't do any
Right.
good in modern society. That's what they're actually saying. They're just trying to get a rise out of people by comparing it to cancer.
I know, but
Right? If
these are
I
the
were to
same.
say like Rush Limbaugh is cancer, people would
Yeah,
know that. I mean, I just don't like Rush Limbaugh, right? And I think he's a poisonous influence in
sure.
society.
But I think the problem is these same people turn around if you say like, oh, Milo Yiannopoulos defended child molesters and he's a racist or something. They take that really seriously and they get really offended and they're like, that ruins our lives. That's
Okay.
slander.
I can't speak for other people, but so I'm not like a cultural libertarian myself, and I'm not an alt-right person myself. I understand these movements. I
Mm,
understand I think I understand what they're angry about, right?
yeah.
I understand what people like Sargon are angry. I mean, first of all, I mean, so the anger at political correctness and feminism is not just a small group of assholes on the internet. It's a widespread feature of society, and there's a reason why these voices are so popular. It's because they speak to a common thing that people are angry about against feminists. And I'm curious, I have an idea of what that is, and I'm curious of what you think people are angry at feminists for,
Mm.
or angry for political correctness for instance.
I find it very confusing. It seems like they're angry at a perception of what feminism is, I guess. And I can see how that perception could be formed. I just don't generally think that it's as big a problem as these people make on. I know that it's like a problem in some universities and some places, but generally, I don't think feminism is doing a huge amount of damage to mankind. So,
Well, I mean, not a huge amount. I don't think it needs to make a huge amount. Well, we could argue about how much damage it's doing to mankind, but I think that people, for instance, I know why I don't call myself a feminist.
because you're conservative. No.
Well, even when I wasn't conservative, I didn't call myself a feminist
Yeah.
because when I was in high school and college, there were a bunch of total assholes who called themselves feminists as a form of affectation and as a
Yep.
form of showing how good they were. And they totally abused women.
Mm.
They totally took advantage of women. They were absolute misogynists.
Yeah.
I mean, they liked the fact that they
Well,
could sleep with a bunch of people. They liked the fact that everyone applauded them when they called themselves feminists, but it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything.
I've seen an article like on Everyday Feminism or on some other place talking about how female feminists need to be careful of male feminists because
Yeah.
sometimes they can be predatory and they're just pretending to be feminists to get laid or whatever. No, and I
Sure.
thought
Then there's a-
that's actually a valid concern because there could be guys out there.
There could be, and there are. I guarantee. I met people
Yeah.
like
No,
that.
but then I saw people talk about that article and they're like, "Oh, God, feminists won't even take it easy on men if they're feminists. So it's just like feminists can't win no matter what they say.
I think but this does get very, I mean, most feminist media, like a majority of it, and I think Shuon had pointed this out, most of their media is like why you should be a feminist, why you should call yourself a feminist, right? That's like a majority of like the mainstream and like MTV type propaganda that has like 100,000 views. It's all geared towards trying to get people to call themselves feminists.
Like Lacey Green or something.
Yeah, exactly, right? But then
you're saying you never try to get people to be conservatives, or you're Catholic. You know, Catholics try to get people to become Catholics, don't they?
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of people who call themselves Catholics that don't go to mass, that don't actually believe anything that the church says. And I'm of the opinion that if you're not going to mass, you're not trying to follow what the church says. I know everyone's not perfect, right? But if you're not trying to do those things and you're not actually following it up with beliefs and action, then I don't really care if you call yourself Catholic. In fact, I prefer people who aren't doing that stuff to not call themselves Catholic, because it would be an acknowledgement of reality.
Well, I think people can call themselves whatever the fuck they want. It's a matter of what they do.
Including if they're, you think absolute misogynists should call themselves feminists?
I believe they exist. Sure. I think there are men out there who say they're feminists for like nefarious reasons. Sure.
What?
But I think there are men out there who would say they're feminists because they want to like look high and mighty and potentially get into women's pants. So it's possible, you know?
Yeah, I mean...
But that doesn't mean that's not what feminism is about. It just means, you know, you can't, just because someone says they're a feminist doesn't mean you can trust them. I know that recently there's been some scandals involving guys who call themselves feminists who were basically creepily stalking and like harassing women and stuff.
Yeah, and that was my personal experience with guys who called themselves feminists long before there were articles published to this effect, and that's why I never called myself a feminist.
But you see, I don't think it has anything to do with the stated goals of feminism, which should be trying to find equality for women. It just means that that term can be abused because anyone can call themselves a feminist, basically. You know?
I don't think, to me, words that are like I said, functionally meaningless, which feminism would be if it were that broad, I don't see the point in them, I guess, right?
I think it's clear to say that it was easier to see what feminism meant back when they were doing really clear things like trying to get the vote, you know?
Yeah.
Because now that the world seems different, like it's harder for people to figure it out, you know?
Well, what are the feminist objectives too? This is another thing, right? Like, it's one thing to say like feminists believe this, feminists believe that, but I also put a lot of stock on what movements teach.
Yeah.
Right. So when people are like, well, that's just radical feminism. Like, I don't care. I go to a women's study class. I take the most common books. That's feminism, because that's what feminists are teaching.
Well, I think the thing is, feminism has, in large parts, it's moved on to cultural and societal issues in terms of like the way people talk about women and the way people depict rape, like the way people prosecute rape, you know, the whole rape culture thing. It's become more cultural. And I think, to me, cultural issues are always going to be more, what's the word, difficult to deal with, you know? It's going to create more backlash and more of a fight. It's going to be more of a culture war. And I feel like people like Sargon are in the middle of that culture war, and that's kind of like what they feed off. That's why every single day is complaining like a feminist did this or a feminist did that.
Well, yeah, I think there's this idea that, and this is the problem with political correctness, right? If I could distill what people don't like about political correctness, right? So when progressives are pushed on political correctness, this is my experience. They usually say that political correctness is a form of politeness, and I totally get that. That's if political correctness were just politeness, I'd be totally on board with it, right?
Yeah.
There's one big difference between political correctness and politeness. Politeness is expected to be reciprocal. And the problem people have with political correctness is that people feel that it's applied only to certain groups and only in certain times. And the places and times that political correctness is applied and expected to have teeth is basically decided by the political motivations of particular progressive groups.
Do you have any examples for this?
Yes. So forgive me for bringing up this example. I don't play video games, but take Jonathan McIntosh's critique of
Yep.
something like Bayonetta, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So he made a bunch of accusations against this, that it was objectifying, that you know, that that this was something that hurt women, right? This is a fair enough critique, right? But why isn't this a critique applied to other things in society? Why is it video games? Because I can find things objectifying that as worse easily in other elements of society, and I don't understand why, if we're going after scantily clad portrayals of women, it's focusing so heavily on this one industry.
Hmm. It's probably just a function of like modernity that people like Macintosh and Sarkeesian can see that this is where the culture is headed because video games have become like the largest industry in the entire fucking world. Like it's bigger than the movie industry. And yeah, I think that's just a function of like technology moving forward. And I guess feminists seeing like this is the next step in I guess the culture wars, I guess I'd say. But
Sure, but do
yeah.
you think that this is a legitimate target for? I mean, like, what's the point of this? What societal ill is being caused by this? I mean,
Well,
first of all, I'm a
I re-
conservative, so
yeah, I remember growing up and seeing Dead or Alive. Do you know that series?
yeah. Well,
And
I'm vaguely aware of it.
all the women in it
The
have
beach
like these
volleyball,
massive boobs, like just the biggest fucking boobs you've ever seen.
that's like
And
the Japanese beach volleyball thing, right?
no, it's a fighting game. But
Okay,
all
I
of the
seem to
women
remember
have
a
just,
did a live beach volleyball, but okay, maybe it's the same concept, right?
but that's been around since
Anime
like the
girls with big breasts, right?
yeah, and that like
Okay.
that's been around since like the mid '90s or whatever. But I mean, like I can agree with equality for women and feminism, and still just look at that game and think that's just stupid. Because I remember when I was a kid going to the computer game arcade or whatever and seeing Dead or Alive, I just thought that game looks stupid, and that's
Can I
all I
ask you a
thought.
question?
You know,
Why is it stupid, and why is it something
because
that I
it's like,
should be
why
concerned
do all the
about?
women have massive boobs? Like, what's the point?
Because it's obviously for sexual titillation.
But I only care about whether a game is good. To be honest, like as a gamer, I care about whether a game's good. I don't care if
Okay,
it's
but
got,
some people play
you know,
games apparently for sexual titillation, right?
I guess, but I mean, it's weird for me to play a fighting game. That's what pornography is for, you know. Like,
Okay, but yeah,
so
but this is what I'm talking about, the hypocrisy.
hmm.
If the objectification of women is the problem, then why don't these people go after pornography?
Well, but would you like that?
I just want a consistent principle.
But as a conservative, would you want them to go after pornography? Because I personally, the only thing I care about
Okay, no,
in the
okay,
porn industry,
here's how I look at it,
yeah,
Demotivator. Jonathan McIntosh made the explicit case that objectifying women for sexual titillation leads to a message that leads to rape culture. It's a subtle cue that encourages men to treat women and abuse women in a misogynistic way.
hmm,
I don't know if that's true or not. It would be incredibly difficult to statistically test,
yeah.
right? It strikes me as that probably is not true. But
I think I'm the wrong
let's
person to
assume that
talk to
it
about
is.
this.
Let's assume that it is, right? For a second.
Yeah. Hmm.
There is no way that slightly scantily clad women in video games contributes to rape culture. If slightly if scantily clad women on uh, uh, in video games were led to increased rape culture, like it was like throwing a match on the tinder of rape culture, then
Yeah.
pornography would like be pouring gasoline on it.
I'm not sure about that.
The amount of objectification of women in pornography, it's such a higher grade drug than scantily clad women in video games. I've
I
never seen a video game that objectified women more than even the lightest pornography.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that I could even figure out because it's too complicated. Because pornography conceivably could make men less repressed because they're they've got a way of letting out their sexual urges by watching pornography. But at the same time, it could make them objectify women. So I don't fucking know if it's a net plus or a net negative.
But
I couldn't say that it contributes
sure,
to rape.
I'm not asking you to judge it in the abstract. I'm saying why is one targeted and the other one not, right?
Well, I think I'm the wrong person to talk to about this because I'm a gamer and I also love like death metal and stuff, and I love violent movies. And I've never been the kind of person that's thought that these things lead to, action, that they lead to violence, they lead to rape. The Columbine shooting. They were saying how these kids were playing Doom and stuff. I'm like, fuck, I played Doom when I was a kid and I didn't shoot up a school.
But this is what Sargon says, isn't it?
He says what?
He says that Anita Sarkeesian and the sexism in video games thing, he says that's not legitimate because the betrayal of something doesn't actually lead to the action of something.
I agree. But you see, I think it's a little more subtle than that because I think it doesn't lead to like rape or it doesn't lead to these things, but it could give it, a certain nudge in terms of objectifying women, maybe. But
it could also give people a certain nudge in terms of like gunning people down, maybe too.
I suppose, but I always think that you already have to have that in you before you could do that, because it's not going to take a normal person and make them shoot someone. It could potentially take someone who's already unstable, already has a lot of problems, already was predisposed to doing something like that.
But I don't understand. There's so much more violence in video games than there is sexism. So if you were to say that video games had even a little bit of impact on the sexism scale, like if you said like it has a slight impact on the sexism scale, I would be way more concerned about the violence, right? Because there's way more violence. So if we said that there's only a very small effect, the fact that there's orders of magnitude more violence than there is sexism would mean that'd be way more. I mean, and frankly, having someone gun down 50 people is way worse than having a guy ogle a girl, in a kiosk. I mean,
well, I think I'm not the best person to talk to about that, because when I relate to or think feminism is good, it's normally not in areas like video games and stuff, because I frankly don't really give a fuck about that. I care more about like politics, representation.
Where do you think feminism is good? Or I'm trying to sell me on it.
Well, I'm not here to sell anything to anybody.
I'm just trying to bring forward conversation. I'm trying to figure this out myself. Right?
I just agree with the general principle of feminism, and maybe at this point in the world, it's a very mundane thing to say you want women to have equality, but that is something that I stand behind, and I think feminism, for all its flaws, is the one movement that's consistently putting that forth and saying women should be equal in the workplace and in home life and and politics, particularly like they need representation, having leave so that they can look after their children.
Well, I'm a big family leave person, so that's one area we'll agree on.
And I think the thing is, it really depends on where you are in the world, because in some countries it's needed a lot more than other countries. But I think so long as they are just talking about equality for women, I'm always going to be empathetic to that message, basically.
But I don't know. It seems like modern feminists, that's not really what they're after. I mean, like going on what they teach, right? Like, I can't get over that, right? Like, regardless of whether you think these people are radical, Gloria Steinem and Naomi Wolf and Bell Hooks, that's what's being taught.
But I think
it's what's in the actual classrooms.
On a personal level, I find it quite easy to just say if some people are being unreasonable assholes, that I just don't give a fuck. So, because I look around the world and I can see that pretty much every goddamn movement has crazy people in it. Basically, I can't think of a single movement or a single group of people that doesn't have crazy bastards.
Yeah, but do they all get taught in the classroom though? I mean, they could be crazy people, but I mean, like, there's crazy Catholics, right? Like,
But
there
what
were
is
like
the
crazy
super?
Catholics who were like writing about like
Right.
there was this guy in the 15th century who wrote a book about how to burn witches or
Yeah,
like Magus Malleus or whatever. And we don't teach that in
but
Catholic schools.
I would ask you, like, what is the horrible, scary thing that feminism is teaching to kids? You know, what is the
What you want to know what I don't like about Gloria Steinem and Bell Hooks?
no, because you're talking about what they teach in schools, not just what those loonies or whatever think. Like
They
what?
teach those loonies in schools. That's
Yeah,
my problem.
but what are they teaching that those people think that is so terrifying?
Their perspective on feminism, like for okay, first of
You
all,
don't think children have the like depending on their age, like they have the ability to figure out what is bullshit. I remember being taught things at school and I was like, that's bullshit, you know. Depends on the age.
but you no, you're asking me to say that. I mean, you could teach people radical things in school, and a lot of people will believe it,
But
right?
what are they
Like,
teaching them? Like what do you like what's the thing that's are
do
they
you want me to go
teaching
through?
that
Okay, how about this? False consciousness, patriarchy theory. I have a huge problem with patriarchy theory.
even if you've got a problem with it, how would it be such a horrible thing to teach the kids? Like what would they do with
It
patriarchy theory?
it encourages a victim narrative. It encourages people to think of history as a systematic abuse of one sex upon another, where there's very little evidence of that actually taking place. It
What?
encourages
Yeah, it
what? Yeah.
was. Of course it was. Like
No,
most of human history.
there are very strict gender roles, and both sexes suffered under them. But the idea that one sex was essentially like the ruling class and the other one was the proletariat does not bear up under evidence.
Well, they weren't necessarily the proletariat, but they were under the thumb of the husband. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious.
I'm under the thumb of the. I mean, first of all, like, okay, so like we're talking about the like majority of history before 1800. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I thought you were just talking about history. Yeah.
yeah, women would have massively shorter lifespans than women because of the work they did was just harder and would have killed
Sorry,
women.
you're so
Right?
robotic. I can't hear you now. You've gone so robot.
Okay, let me try to do this.
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah, a little better.
Okay, so before 1800,
Mhm.
men would have had massively shorter lives than women because of the type of work they did,
Hmm.
which was very, very dangerous for the most
Oh,
part.
yeah.
Plowing,
Yeah.
massive casualties. They would have been women would have been physically incapable. Women, if women had to have done that, they would have died in droves.
Yeah.
Second of all, men didn't have political power for the most part. They were kings, but a noble woman would have had massively more political power than even upper class or quote unquote middle class townsfolk in any age before 1800.
But would you say in the power differential between a male and a female that the women had as much power as the man? I seriously
Nobody
did
had
not
any.
see
You're
that.
talking about the majority of people.
I'm
You're
talking about in
talking
the
about
relationship
noble woman
between the
versus a
man and the
noble
woman.
man.
No, I mean in the relationship,
For
like
deciding what
that guy was the breadwinner, obviously. He does have to do the more dangerous thing, but he's
sure,
gonna
I
have
guess.
yeah.
What are you deciding over? Like whether to sell the cow?
No, what legal rights would she have in comparison to him?
Legal rights for what? Can you be more specific?
I don't think I can because we're talking about all of human history, basically. So
No,
it's
I
incredibly
mean,
vague.
we're talking. People didn't have political power before very recently,
Yeah.
unless we're talking about like. So we're talking about when we're talking about women's rights is we're saying that women's rights lagged behind men's rights, right? There's like a phase differential, right?
Yeah.
Such that
Mhm.
men got rights first, and then it took about 60 or 70 years for women to get the same rights.
Mm.
But like the right to vote, right? Like men didn't have that before like 1850 for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, uh, the right to like trial by jury. Most
Mm.
people didn't have that for the majority of human history, and women would have had that at the same time that men did. I'm
Mm.
trying to think of other rights, right? I guess property rights, but who owned property? In most societies, women could own property. So, I mean, the picture they portray, it takes a nuanced historical vision and it condenses it into a simplistic narrative about class oppression, which does not fit into the actual facts.
But the thing that I find curious about that is that if you actually look at who was actually producing things in society in terms of the music, the writing, the art, the politics, everything was men, basically. Like, you had some women around the edges, but, you know, scientists, mathematicians, philosophers, it was all men. And I don't think it's realistic to think that women were just sitting around like, I don't feel like doing anything. I feel like they didn't have the opportunity to actually be prominent in society.
Well, I mean, like, you mean that schools. Well, I guess you're right. I mean, there was a lag between when female schooling came around and when male schooling came around. They used the right word there. It's a little bit late here. Yeah,
but it is
male schooling led female schooling. So there would always be more educated men in a society than there would be educated women. So because of that, you'd expect that most of the people who were doing educated things would be men, and most of the contributions on scientific fronts would be men too.
I know, but that's kind of like, it reminds me of the argument when they're like, oh, there's so many men in prison, for example, but there's so many men also committing crimes, and you know, they're the ones actually out there in society.
Sure, but I mean,
doing things that make them end up getting put in prison, basically.
Can I give you an example? I mean, like, for a majority of human history, most technological advancement came out of one thing: war. War.
Right.
War. Not education, not universities. Universities are more or less modern invention. Now, more men were in contact with this driving force of technological innovation because they're the ones fighting and dying in wars. And they were more prominently involved in the construction of new and better technology to fight those wars. Look, there's differences in sexes. Both sexes had different gender roles, and they both sucked, right? But like, relitigating history, I mean, am I going to go back and go like, oh, why did women like not die as much as men did in the past? Like that's a ridiculous question to ask, right?
Well, but I think the main point for me is just in terms of people being able to express themselves in society, and I think women would feel, just to speak for all women, because I have that power. No. That they were not able to express themselves historically because I guess their voices were being suppressed by, you know, male dominance. I think that's fairly obvious if you actually just look through history. It's like dominated by men.
But there's like 5% of it, like a fraction of percent of aristocrats got to express themselves all throughout society.
Right.
Most, like, you're talking about, like, when you're talking about the people who got to express themselves in society, and we're talking about history, we're talking about a very tiny, minuscule elite of people.
So we're just saying that the patriarchy was narrow, or what?
No, you could express yourself more as a duchess than you could express yourself as a male peasant.
Yes. I think that's fairly obvious.
Okay, so, but what I'm saying is the patriarchy theory takes this nuanced perspective and it condenses it into a simplified cartoon. I'm not saying that women had everything equal. It was very unequal. Of course it was unequal. But I'm saying talking exclusively about the things that women couldn't do and then not going over and actually providing a nuanced idea of what it actually was like to live in these ages gone by doesn't actually give us any kind of idea of what the historical reality was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, patriarchy is an interesting concept. It's not really something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, but I guess I could look into it more, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I'm more concerned with like politics and that kind of thing generally.
What about politics?
Well, well, I mean, you know, it really depends what country you're in, because I mean, you're in America, obviously.
Well, you've actually done a lot of stuff on American politics, haven't you?
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of my interest in that grew out of watching The Young Turks, who you probably hate.
I
don't know if you hate
about them. I just don't like Cenk's rhetorical style.
Right.
It just kind of grates on me a little bit. I don't know much about them other than that, though.
But I think, like, from what I've seen, when you look at American politics, it makes it easier to make a case that there's some kind of weird patriarchal thing going on, because just so many of the politicians over there are just old white males, basically.
Well, I
And
mean,
it's just like, why are there so many old white males in power?
well, hold on. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What percentage of the New Zealand Parliament's white male?
Oh, probably a decent chunk. Yeah. I know.
A
I
decent
think we've
chunk.
got.
Come on, it's like what? Come on, like New
Oh no,
Zealand.
I was reading about this. Yeah, we've got hardly any women in power.
No, you said white. How many of it's white?
A decent chunk it would be. I'd have to look it up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it's the same in the fucking UK. It's like it's the same everywhere. I don't know what the deal is with that. There's not.
Okay, but these countries are all. I can ask a question.
What's that?
Thinking about this country is a majority white, right?
Well, America.
You'd expect that. Yeah,
but it would definitely not. You'd not have like racial parity in power.
Oh, there's not racial parity, no.
Yeah, but, I mean, or gender parity.
No.
But do you think? But why do you think that is? Do you think it's like a meritocracy, and just white dudes happen to be the most talented at everything?
Meritocracy is a stupid idea.
What is meritocracy?
Meritocracy. It's never occurred. It never will be. Nothing ever will be a meritocracy. It doesn't mean that we can dispense with justice. And what?
I thought conservatives were into that kind of thing.
I think this is a generational thing. And I think that, like, I think that it's wrong to say favoritism is evil, and favoritism is evil, and unearned advantage should always be guarded against. And I don't think discrimination should ever be, like, the components that would detract from meritocracy are bad. But the idea that people get their positions of power because of some merit is never going to be real. Yeah, it's totally. I mean, in some abstract sense, like, maybe we can strive towards some kind of meritocracy, but we should be under no illusion that this will never be a human reality ever. Mm-hmm. And it's not like it's even theoretically possible. It's not like I could give progressives 100% of power to be a meritocracy either. The concept is just totally unimplementable.
Well. One of the things that makes me think of is people are always saying, if you've got affirmative action, or if you're trying to give people a leg up, then that will stop the most qualified candidates from getting the job. And the thing that confuses me about that is, why do they always assume that the most qualified candidate is going to be like a dude who's, I don't know, 30 something? Like, why do they assume that minorities and women, etc., are necessarily not going to be the most qualified? That always seems to be how that comes out to me.
Well, if you could, but Tim, you're ignoring one thing. If it were the case that affirmative action was just sort of a cure for an implicit bias, right? The solution would not be to implement quotas or a point system that benefited certain races. The solution would just be to blind test all the applications.
Yeah, but if you ended up with lots of women or something, they would still probably say that there was something rigged about it. Because, like, why is the most qualified candidate never the minority or the woman? Why is it always like the dude?
Well, minorities are dudes too, so I don't even know.
Well, that's true. The white dude. I'm just playing some racial politics. I have the immunity.
To tell you the truth, Tim, in this country, the affirmative action matters more on race than it does on gender, in almost all situations.
Yep.
And I'm currently broadcasting from the West Coast, from a town called Berkeley, and this is the best example of affirmative action you'll ever see. Do you know the differential in SAT scores between an Asian applicant and a black applicant here?
It's probably large.
It's like 500 or 600 points. It's enormous.
But why do you think that is?
Well, because Berkeley doesn't get enough applicants that meet would be a standard that would, if they made the standard a certain cutoff, they would have almost no African American students in their school. Right,
and would you see that as a problem, or would you just be like, I guess they're not good enough.
You asked me originally, like, why is the most qualified guy always the guy, the Asian guy, for instance?
Yeah.
I didn't deem it this way. I didn't make it so that the Asian would have higher SAT scores than the African American would.
Yeah.
Okay, so how would I be able to make that? I mean, the reality is that Berkeley, the University of California, has an enormous number of Asian applicants that have perfect GPAs and have incredibly high test scores. And it has very, very few African American applicants.
Well, I think the thing is, liberals and progressives would want to try to help those African American people to try and lift their scores up, and I guess like through grants and that kind of thing, I mean, provide some kind of
aid.
Yeah, provide some kind of aid, some kind of help. One of the things was, Bernie Sanders having free college access, which we don't even have in New Zealand.
But affirmative action is not the same thing as free college access. We're talking about the admission standards for these places.
Right. Well, no, that would just be like part of the puzzle. I'm pretty sure like a liberal or progressive would want to look at the whole range of solutions.
No, the big problem is not the funding, because the funding would be there if the college could get the applicants up. Yeah. They're just way too much wealth in this location for that not to be the case. The problem, and this is, you brought up affirmative action. The affirmative action does not deal with funding. It deals with the qualifications involved in admitting these students or not admitting these students.
Yeah.
And so is it fair to, essentially benefit the African American student over the Asian student in this way?
It's a difficult question, because I think on a societal level, you wouldn't, in an ideal world, you wouldn't want to have to implement a policy like that. But I think if you see African Americans falling behind to an unreasonable degree, then
we do see that in the society.
Yeah, then that is something that you would look at implementing. But the moment you implement it, people go ballistic because they feel like you are discriminating against people who, actually have all of those opportunities already.
Tim, let's call a spade a spade. We are discriminating against Asians in the University of California.
But it's just a trade-off for, African Americans basically lagging behind miserably. And the more they lag behind, the more people say like, oh, it's their fault and they should have lifted themselves up. And,
well, I mean,
look at this black culture. Blacks don't care about education and all this shit, But I think progressives would say like, we want to actually try to help them somehow. Well,
I want to help the African American community, but I mean, I'm not so sure how. But affirmative action was originally sold to this country as something that would be kept around for 20 years max, and then the problem would be over. It wasn't meant to be an institution that constantly kept one racial group, getting, an increase. It wasn't different standards for all the different races in this country.
Yeah.
I don't believe in meritocracy. I don't believe that you can go to a student in Cal and say, you're just more virtuous than a person who's at a lower tier school or a person who never went to college. That's ridiculous, because people have disadvantages. People don't always end up in the same place. We can never see that. But at the same time, it's unfair. That communicates a sense of injustice if you were to tell people that the color of your skin controls the standards that you are judged at to get into a school place to study.
Yeah. But I think the bottom line is, and I'm just thinking of the video Sargon made about this, is what would you want to do about African Americans falling behind? Would you want to do anything or just leave it, that's just something that we can't have an impact on. It's wrong to try and fix this somehow,
Well, you fix it presumably earlier in the educational process, right?
So I got this weird ringing noise. What the fuck is that?
Okay, let me move my microphone. Is that better?
Is that you? Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, okay, that was confusing. Well, and Sargon made a video talking about this, and he said poverty was the problem. It's poverty.
Family structure too.
And then he concluded at the end that the problem was the black family and that there was a problem with black culture and they have to just lift themselves out of the thing or something. And to me, that's basically like, poverty is the problem, but they just need some magic beans and then just, make a beanstalk and then climb the beanstalk to magic land. It's like he didn't have any fucking solutions at all. And I think at the very least, liberals and progressives are trying to think of solutions. And that's partly what affirmative action was. It was like them trying to
it's a solution that didn't work.
People. Well, people have a lot of problems with the solution. But
it didn't work. It didn't do what it was supposed to do.
Well, but I'm saying that it's them trying to actually think of something to help them rather than the Sargon thing of like black people just have to magically be better. And
I don't know how you're going to. I mean, this is the thing. I'm not so sure how you're going to have. We could try to do poverty reduction programs, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I don't see why not.
Well, but
community investment would be a good thing. Like community investment.
Well, I mean, this brings us into the whole Black Lives Matter thing too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. It's a good segue, right? But I mean, this is the problem. Like, if you look at these inner city communities, and this is, maybe you don't understand this about American politics, but what frustrates conservatives like me, all these shootings occur in communities that they're politically dominated by African Americans. They're democratically dominated. There's never been a Republican in any of these cities like Baltimore, Milwaukee, or Ferguson. They're all democratically dominated, or New York or Los Angeles. They're all democratically. They've been democratically dominated for like 50 or 60 years now, right?
Politically dominated by African Americans. I've never heard of that.
Baltimore, yes. The police officers were half African American. The police chief was African American. The DA was African American. The mayor is African American. The city council was like 65% African American. I have to look at the percentage. It might be. It was close. The attorney general that oversaw the investigation was African American. The president's African American. I mean, like, what part of the Baltimore situation is not politically dominated by the Democratic Party in the African American community?
But what's the significance of this, of what you're saying?
The significance of it is what great idea is there that's not politically being implemented here, right?
But you're kind of assuming just because they're African American that will somehow have some, huge positive impact. I mean, it's good for them, it's good for the African American community to have representation. But what kind of matters more is, I think, investment in those communities. In terms of programs like things that they can try to do to reduce crime, like education, community investment, infrastructure. I mean,
you want to reduce crime. I mean,
well, I don't know what else you're supposed to do. Like people say,
down, typically,
put in more police with more weapons. I mean, I don't know if that's
putting in more police. I mean, this was a policy that was tried in the late 80s and early 90s, and it was believed, and this is contested, that this is what kicked off the big decrease in crime that we're still experiencing and maybe reversing itself just now.
Yeah.
This is called broken windows policing.
Yeah. I was just about to mention that. Yeah, broken windows. That was Giuliani, wasn't
it? Yeah, him and a bunch of other mayors implemented this. The idea is essentially to police black neighborhoods like you would police rich white ones, right? Yeah. So it used to be in the early 80s, right, that the police would go into black neighborhoods and, like, if you weren't shooting somebody or like explicitly dealing drugs, they wouldn't do anything, right? Like if you were like breaking a window or like just going around and like obviously up to no, like, but if you were in a white community and people were doing those things, they just arrest you, right? So the idea was to crack down on the small things, even in these ethnic communities, which leads to a lot more arrests. It leads to a lot more police interaction with the African American community. But it was thought that would reduce crime.
I can't remember if that was debunked or not.
Well, it's contested. It's debunked. What do you mean debunked? There's a bunch of I keep a lot of there's like 5 papers that say it's good, and there's like 3 or 4 more recent papers that say it's bad. So you can, if you want to take those 3 or 4 papers and go like these 3 papers beat the older ones, then you can call it debunked. But there are people on both sides of this issue in the academia that claim that this is a good and bad policy. So
Yep. I think there is a valid thing to be said for the us versus them feeling of like police against the community. And I think that's a very negative cycle of just feeling like, oh, the police are not here to serve us. They're basically here to, bust our balls, basically.
That's the perception in the African American. That's how they feel, certainly.
Right, but a lot of people can't even acknowledge that they feel that. They're basically like, they have no concerns. They're just whiners and they're victims and blah, blah, blah.
Who says that? I mean,
a lot of people do. Heaps of people who hate Black Lives Matter.
Well, I mean, I don't particularly like Black Lives Matter because I think it encourages that feeling.
Like TJ Kirk said that black culture is a victim cult, which is one of the most insane things. The Amazing Atheist, yeah.
Oh, TJ, okay, TJ, yeah, okay.
I was like, how can you dismiss an entire? He's literally said black culture, an entire culture is victim cult. Like that is like the way people talk about this is insane. I think like
would you say that Black Lives Matter? I mean, how would you characterize them?
I would say they don't have the best PR in the world, but I would say that they do have valid concerns, even if it's just perceptually, even if they're just perceiving that people in our community are continually being shot. If people in my community were perceived to being continually being shot, I would be concerned because I'd be like, every time I go out the door, I'm afraid I'm going to get shot, even if that's not true, even if it's irrational.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is, you are very much more likely. The African American community has a lot of violence in it, but not very much of that violence comes from police officers.
I know, but I think it's partly perceptual. And people say, well, fuck your perceptions. But I think a lot of the world is based upon perceptions. And if you perceive that you're in a lot of danger, you're going to react.
Black Lives Matter isn't saying that we need to modify the perceptions. It's saying that we need to modify the policy.
I know.
So you're saying that we should base changes in policy on inaccurate perceptions?
It depends. How much do you care about whether the African American community gets along with police?
No, I mean, but if someone has a misperception about reality, I mean, I correct that misperception. I don't I don't try to act like their misperception is reality to make them feel better about their misperception.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you feel threatened, then wouldn't you prefer that somebody try to alleviate your fears rather than just tell you to get fucked?
I want people to alleviate. I think we should try to alleviate the African American community's fear about police because it's not based on. I'm not even I'm not commenting on whether it's true or not. I'm just saying it's a fact that they perceive it to be that way, and I am willing to treat people's concerns as valid, even if I don't know if they're as true as they say they are. But are you willing to treat people's concerns as valid if you know they're false?
I didn't say I know it was false, just that I know that there's a perception that they are being. I don't know. I'd have to look at the statistics right now. I don't have them on hand. I have a rough idea of the statistics. What do you think? Just in terms of how many African Americans are being shot proportionately by police and that kind of thing.
I mean, a lot more. I think it's about 30 or 40. It's about 35%, I think, roughly.
I can't say it off the top of my head.
Twice the percentage of the population there.
I would just have to go check it after the hangout, and then I'd feel stupid because I'd be like, "Fuck, I didn't have it on hand." But yeah,
I kind of pulled the number. It's roughly. I remember watching debate. It's roughly twice the percentage, I think, of what they are in the population. So it's probably I think 20 or 30.
Okay. You see, but I think that is a perception thing because statistically, you'd be very unlikely to be killed by the police. Probably very unlikely to be killed by the police if you're anybody. But every day they sing on TV, some person got shot in their community, and that would freak you out. It would freak me out. If that was happening in my neighborhood, it would freak me out. Even though if I walk around the neighborhood,
it's like a Catholic got shot by the police today. A Catholic got shot in New York. But today, a Protestant cop shot a Catholic, and they probably do this in Northern Ireland. A Protestant cop shot a Catholic, an unarmed Catholic. And but if the media reported it this way, a perception would build in my mind that Protestant cops were out to shoot Catholics, right? Would that be like accurate statistically?
Yeah, but you'd also have a lot of people out there saying this is the Catholics' culture. You know, Catholics are like this. They've got a lot of this coming on themselves. This damn
People
Catholics.
did say that.
Well, people say that about black people. Like, what about black on black crime? What about Catholic on Catholic crime? You know, so the media.
I'm sure that in the 19th century, cops probably killed a lot more Catholics than they did Protestants.
Well, I mean, if you want to argue that the media doesn't report stuff very well, I think we'd agree. Maybe we'll come from slightly different angles, but I think we'd both agree that they do a lot of fear mongering, whatever the case is.
Yeah, I'd say in this case for sure. I mean, it's interesting, I guess. I mean,
there's one. Well, this is getting onto the gun thing, but like this is not a problem that, like in my country, for example, would really happen because we'd just be talking about like, stabbings and stuff. Basically, I think a lot of it is there's so many fucking guns, and I mean that's getting onto the gun thing. But I feel like when you walk down the street in America, surely when you walk down the street in America, you're more aware of the fact that somebody somewhere could have a gun. Because I would never imagine walking around in New Zealand that someone has a gun. I just wouldn't even think about it.
I mean, I don't usually think about it. I mean, like, okay, put it this way. Municipalities have their own regulations on guns in this country. And so a lot of municipalities like Chicago have functionally, and this could be challenged in the Supreme Court because it's technically unconstitutional, but they've functionally made it impossible to sell guns. But these areas are more dangerous than the rural areas where everybody has guns.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's also the conversation it gets on ridiculous things like people are going after rifles, you know, like that's the big Democratic thing right now is let's go after rifles.
Yeah.
Right. Like, why? Like, how many people in this country get killed by rifles?
But how do you define a rifle?
A rifle is a rifle. It's a gun
but I mean, that doesn't include
the bullet.
Doesn't include like semi-automatics that they've been using in these.
Almost all rifles are semi-automatics. Almost all handguns are semi-automatic.
What the fuck's it called again? That one that everybody uses?
The AR-15?
Yeah, that one. Is that a rifle?
That's a rifle, yes.
Oh, okay.
Semi-automatic rifle.
Well, because that's the scary boogeyman gun of the moment, is the AR-15.
But that's because the media, there's something more dangerous about that gun than any other gun.
I do think that when that gun is used to like kill 25 people in a school, you know, you can have all kinds of talking points about how the gun is not that dangerous, but people are not going to listen because 25 people got shot down in a school with that gun.
But this is the whole thing with perception. I'm not building policy on people's media-induced perceptions of things. We had to build policy on reality. And in reality,
in reality that happened, even though it's only one event in a very large country, which is very small. People saw that and were like, that is a weird thing to happen in a country.
Right, and then in that same year, somebody like blew up 3 people with rice cookers in Boston. We want to ban rice cookers?
I don't know about that. Rice cookers.
Yeah, exactly. But that happened, right? That's part of reality. I mean, what if we just started getting rifles kill an extraordinarily few number of people in this country?
Yeah. So it's a matter of type of gun to you.
Pardon me?
So it's a matter of type of gun.
Well, that's the legislation being proposed.
Yeah.
Banning rifles, like semi-automatic rifles, essentially.
Yeah. But I do think there is an emotional element to these subjects, you know, because it's a very intense thing to see happen. Like the Newtown school shooting.
Sure, and there's an emotional element for us invading Iraq, but it was still a shitty idea. I mean, like we largely invaded Iraq because of catharsis for September 11th. Well, that's how bad policy gets made and done. It's like, I feel angry, so I'm gonna like invade Iraq or vote for Donald Trump or whatever.
Yeah.
The heck.
But if they banned the rifles or whatever, what negative thing would that produce? Would it produce some negative side effect?
Okay, first of all, in order to ban the rifle, okay, well, yeah, I mean, it's bad policy. It basically like bans a bunch of hunters' guns, right? Like the AR-15 is used predominantly for hunting.
Is it?
Yes.
Why do you need
popular
AR-15 for hunting?
Well, I mean, you'll need a semi-automatic rifle for big game hunting. I think. Well, I hold on. I had to check this actually. I but I believe the AR-15 is used for hunting. First of all, semi-automatic rifles are used for hunting for big game hunting all the time because you need a semi-automatic rifle for any kind of game that could possibly come after you. You're not gonna, you know, I wouldn't want to be using some kind of dual action rifle if I like winged a gigantic bear, right? That would be the last you'd ever hear of me. So for the you'd be banning.
Oh, you're robotic.
You'd be banning up gun is popular among people who don't commit a lot of crimes and murder people, and not banning gun and not going after people who are criminals. That just it undermines a lot of trust that people have in their government, right?
That they can't buy AR-15s for hunting.
They're going to make it so you can't buy them, but they can keep the ones that they have bought.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what of the country are gun enthusiasts.
Pardon me?
I don't know what percentage of America are gun enthusiasts. But
a lot of people have guns in this country. I think it's about I'm quoting all these statistics, and I know a few of them are going to be wrong, and people are going to complain in the section. But I think it's about a third, and that's a guess.
Okay. Yeah, I just remembered I had a brain fart when you said rice cookers, but it did. I just realized, it made me think of the argument about cars, like when people use cars as weapons to like run people over.
Sure, the guy in Nice, right, killed like a bunch of people with a lorry.
But the thing that makes me think of is that a lorry or a car serves a different function, which is travel, and a rice cooker serves the function of cooking rice. Whereas a gun, I guess, is for killing stuff. I guess you could kill animals instead of humans, but
you can also use it for self-defense, which is legitimate use.
And you can use it for cooking bacon, like Ted Cruz. But that's the thing, is like, it's true. You can use just about anything as a weapon, but some things are easier to use as weapons, such as weapons. Because it is a weapon. Okay. Well, I mean, a rice cooker was not designed as a weapon, so I mean that's the thing that I should have said when you said rice cooker, but I just went instead.
But I don't understand, if these things are dangerous, then what's the difference ultimately? Because one was designed as a weapon.
Yeah. I think that's relevant. If you
I'm not following how. I guess I mean the guns have hunting and self-defense are legitimate functions for guns, right?
Yeah, but their purpose is violence, right? I mean, that's what they're for.
But there's legitimate uses for violence, so
it depends on the situation, but obviously
exactly
you can use a rice cooker to blow something up, but it's also a lot easier to kill people with an AR-15, I would say. And the rice cooker, I think it's because if you went into a crowd with an AR-15, it'd be a lot easier to kill a fuckload of people, I think.
I don't know. I mean, bomb attacks kill a lot of people.
That's true.
I mean, if you're in a constrained area, totally depends on the situation.
Yeah.
And first of all, we understand the difference between a semi-automatic and a fully automatic gun. People don't know the difference. And, like, almost all handguns are semi-automatic.
But I think, like, I've thought about that before, like the difference between semi and fully automatic. I think it's pretty fucking irrelevant, because you can press the trigger pretty fast on a semi-automatic and kill a lot of people real quickly, and people have. So it's like the difference between, I don't know, having fucking half your body blown up versus your entire body. It's like you're still gonna die.
Have you fired a semi-automatic versus a fully automatic gun?
I have not, but I do know about people using semi-automatics to kill a lot of people in a short amount of time, and because that's constantly
sure.
Yeah.
The difference is pretty unmistakable if you fire the weapons.
Well, wouldn't it be the difference between killing, I don't know, 60 people and 25 people or something like that?
Yeah, might be the difference, but that's twice as many people.
You're still killing a fuckload of... But that's why they should have those limitations on
the
size of gun clips, for example.
But Tim, I have friends with 3D printers. You can print up gun clips that holds as many bullets as you want.
Yeah. Well, but you do at least have to be technically savvy to do that, don't you? Or do you think any idiot with a 3D printer can print off?
Most of these guns that are used to commit crimes, they're not even legally purchased.
Yeah.
It just the whole thing. It just seems so roundabout, right? Like these guns don't commit most crimes. Rifles that we're talking about banning. There's no evidence that an increased number of guns in this country has led to an increased number of crime, because the amount of guns in this country has gone up incredibly in the last 20 years, and crime has dropped like a brick, right? So there's no evidence. What?
Objectively, this may sound silly, but it's actually not. It's objectively led to a lot more gun crime, because there's not gun crime in countries that don't really have guns. So,
every form of crime, every form of murder is down.
Yeah, but you still have...
Do you know how they get those inflated gun crime statistics? Is they include suicides in them.
Well, yeah, but I would say that's a problem too. People using guns to kill themselves. I don't see how that...
Who kills themselves with a rifle?
I think if you... and I'm sure I've seen a statistic on this. If you have a gun, you're incredibly more likely to kill yourself than if you don't, because you have the opportunity to rethink it, You have a gun, you just like press the trigger and you're dead,
I guess, to me, suicides is,
I think that should be included.
The conversation you want to have is
guns, yeah.
What?
I think suicides with guns should be included as part of the negative aspects of guns, because it's a very easy way to kill yourself.
But the conversation just becomes ridiculous. First of all, culturally, if people want to kill themselves, there's going to be one-off ways to kill yourself. You can jump off a bridge.
Of course.
You can throw yourself under the train tracks like they do all the time in Paris. You don't have a chance to rethink that.
I saw a statistic on this somewhere, but I cannot remember what it was. But it was basically saying how much more likely you are to kill yourself, if you're suicidal and you have a gun versus if you don't. Because if you don't have a gun, you're going to have to figure out some other way. And then often people get cold feet or change their mind because they can't think of a decent way to kill themselves. So if they've got a gun,
wouldn't that mean that the United States would... But wouldn't that... other countries have much higher... The United States isn't unique in its suicide rate, to my understanding.
Yeah, it's just the use of guns to do so. So I guess if you make guns...
So that's evidence that it's not guns.
Is it?
If the suicide rate is the same, but we just kill ourselves more with guns in this country, that would be evidence that the existence of guns isn't what's leading to the suicide.
But it is evidence that a gun is a very convenient way of killing yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like if you if you had a shop selling nooses to people,
yeah, they're called hardware stores.
I guess that's true. Well, but that's the thing, is you've got to have the presence of mind to actually come up with some method to kill yourself. And people get cold feet and they decide to not do it.
You don't sell links of rope with 2-week waiting periods either, which you would have to do for a gun.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
It just seems that people who don't understand guns are singling this out as some kind of unique problem that needs to be solved, right? And I never hear what the great argument is for or against it, right?
But what do you mean understanding of guns? Do you mean in terms of how guns function?
Like people talk about assault rifles, right? Like what's an assault rifle?
Yeah.
Hear constantly about assault rifles.
We were just talking about that, and I don't think that's that important. I think the difference between the semi-automatic and automatic is obviously the automatic's worse, but they're both guns that you can use to kill people with. So I don't know why it's such a huge talking point on the right.
So the automatic guns are illegal for the most part in this country.
Right. I mean, they're bad, but so are semi-automatics.
Semi-automatics are almost all guns.
No, and they're also bad. So.
What?
And they're also bad because you can kill a lot of people with semi-automatics, can't you?
You can kill a lot of people. You can kill a lot of people with a shotgun too. I mean,
Sure.
and you can kill a lot of people with, like I said, you can kill a lot of people with rice cookers. You know, I mean,
Fuck, there was a mass stabbing in Japan recently,
yeah.
but apparently that mass stabbing occurred in basically an invalid's home, so they none of the people could escape. Oh, jeez, that is fucked up.
In most of these cases where a lot of people are killed, they're
Mm.
killed more due to the fact of the lack of escape routes than they are due to the type of weapon being used.
But I do think like there was another stabbing in China when like 29 people got stabbed and nobody died. Imagine how much more effort that would be than just having a gun, running around stabbing 29 people. Like it would be a lot more work.
I guess. I mean, I think we're going after the wrong thing because we understand that crime rates can significantly reduce even as the gun ownership increases. We also know regionally that in areas that have high gun ownership legally, crime rates are very, very low, and areas that have low legal ownership, say cities, have very, very high gun death and gun
But
crime rate.
maybe it's not necessarily the crime rate, which is a significant thing, but the way in which people are committing crimes and the fact that it makes it easier
This is
to,
like murder rate. How about that's maybe a better one?
yeah. Well, I mean, I would have to look at the gun crime rate, and there'd be no comparison between America and a place that doesn't have guns, obviously, because they don't have guns to commit gun crimes with. They'll commit different crimes, like stabbings or um, other such things.
Yeah, well, I think
In
we kind of
America, they should
exhausted what.
Well, in America, a lot of the suicides will be gun suicides, and then in a country like New Zealand, a lot of it will be like hangings or knives or you know something else. Yeah.
Okay, but I don't care if somebody shoots themselves or hangs themselves. The gun suicide isn't somehow worse than the hanging.
Hmm.
I, I,
I
I don't
yeah.
I don't see why it would be. Uh, I mean, let's get. I want to kind of push on some issues that I kind of think that we'll really disagree with. Like,
Sure.
well, I'm Catholic, right? So I'm sure there's lots of issues here, like abortion and other things. Other things having to do with sort of the sexual revolution and its aftermath that we'll disagree with. So then we exhausted the gun thing, right? Um, Obviously, I'm an opponent of abortion. Uh, I understand that the likelihood of actually getting it legalized is almost impossible. Um, but I don't know. I guess I'm just interested to hear your. So, I mean, can I ask you things like we're now looking at like gay marriage and
Mhm.
well, I asked this to the person I had on a cultural competition. I asked this to a lot of people. I think the fundamental issue that I have with abortion is just the question over whether do people so a person has sex,
Yes.
right? They accidentally conceive.
Hmm.
Now, can we say that that person has a moral responsibility over the life they conceive, um, or not? And if they have a moral responsibility, does that translate into a legal responsibility?
It depends. When are you talking about? Are you talking about moment of conception?
Um, so when do they develop that responsibility? Is also like I guess.
Yeah, like if they like I don't know, 3 weeks later they find out they're pregnant or whatever, and then they take a pill or something to stop it, then or if they do whatever to get rid of it, would you say that that's like murder or something?
Uh, Luckily, life begins at the conception. So I mean, it is killing. I don't. It is definitely killing a human life.
I don't think it is. I think, and you're gonna hate me, and all conservatives in the world are gonna hate me. I think it's like killing a collection of
Okay.
cells. It's basically like
I'm going
killing
to
some
ask
goo.
you a month
It's
before
like some glue, basically.
a month before a fetus is born, if you stab it in the, or let's say 2 or 3 months before a fetus is born, if you stab it in the skull and drain its brain out, is
But
that
I thought that was the whole debate: is like at what point is the fetus developed enough for us to consider it not to be sort of just some gloop, but to be kind of
you asked me the
human,
question about
yeah.
the early one. Now I'm going to ask you the question about the later one. Do you believe that 2.5 months before a fetus is born, you can stab it in the head and suck its brains out?
Why would you suck its brains out? Are you
You
talking about for?
you collapse you collapse the skull so that it fits out of the birth canal.
I
And so
think
you
that
the child's body in half, and they collapse its skull through suction. I believe that's dilation, and they extract the pieces of it.
well, how quickly does it die?
Um,
Would it be
that's a good
instantaneous?
question. Sometimes children have been born alive and then subsequently hacked apart by doctors at this stage at this stage. Um, there are several people who are alive who, when they were hacked apart, they didn't die, and the doctor revived them later, unbeknownst to the woman who asked for the abortion, and they're walking around today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not many people. Obviously, it's like 2 people, I think.
Well,
But
I don't think I really
we
agree
could
with
go
like
to
late term
procedures of
abortion.
abortion.
I don't really
What?
agree with late term abortion. I think there's like some kind of middle area of development beyond which I think it would probably be unreasonable to abort the baby. But I think like countries,
Do you believe? What do you believe actually is going on when that occurs?
well, it's forming, obviously. It's forming.
How is it different than a born child, though? I don't understand. At that late stage.
We're not talking about the late stage. I was talking about prior to that 2.5 month period where it's like late term abortion.
Let's talk
Prior
about
to that,
late second trimester abortions.
well, but I don't
Like,
agree with.
Is that murder? Is that?
I don't know if it's murder, but like I
Is
don't.
that killing I didn't say murder myself, but killing a human life.
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I'm not for late term abortions. So.
Well, then they're legal in this country.
Yeah. Well, but I'm not. I'm not for them. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Do you want me to disagree with you? Just
No, but you're saying that you are against Roe v. Wade.
No. I'm pro-choice, but God damn it, gotta let my girlfriend in. One moment.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Can you riff for a while or something?
I can riff, yes.
Talk about how stupid I am.
There's like 9 people watching, so I'm wondering if anyone wants to ask a question.
Sweet.
Okay, let's see.
Hello.
Hello?
I guess I would just ask, are you against abortion, period?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, but the question, I guess, is, well, okay, this is the thing. I guess I didn't enable live chat, but I'm definitely against abortion.
Yeah.
Now, I think that we could ask ourselves, how do we confront abortion now that it's been legal for so long? And that's an interesting question. There's basically no way that we can legalize abortion without massively changing the sexual culture in this country, and probably throughout most of the Western world.
Yeah.
I kind of look at it like slavery, like it didn't matter that people knew slavery was wrong. People did know that slavery was wrong. Actually, people kind of like, there was sort of this understanding that slavery was vaguely bad, but by the 19th century, they knew it was really bad. But the problem was that the economy ran on cotton. The thing is, our sexual economy relies on the idea that sex cannot have any lasting consequences, and we need abortion to ensure that illusion, just as the Southern economy relied on the illusion that they could produce almost an infinite amount of cotton with almost no labor cost whatsoever. And as long as we rely on that illusion, abortion will remain legal, just like slavery remained legal.
Yeah,
So
but I think the
yeah,
question is whose choice is it to abort? You know,
nobody.
well,
It's not a decision. Whose
look,
decision is it not to drown your child? I mean, it's nobody's decision on whether to murder another person.
but that's the thing. It means that you are deciding for the woman, basically.
There's no decision to be had. It's. I mean, what do you mean? I'm deciding for the woman. I mean, there's no
No, but you can't.
decision.
No, but yes, there is, because you can't decide what somebody else decides. If a woman decides, I want to get an abortion, you're saying you can't get one. Does that mean, like, what if she doesn't want the child? Will you take the child, I guess? Or the man will take the child?
What?
Like, what happens to the child then if you don't abort it? Like, who looks after it? Does she have to look after
Oh,
it?
there's more than enough families that are willing to adopt children in this
So you
country.
would just,
Oh, for sure.
everyone, you'd just adopt out all the babies.
Yes, and that there are numerous organizations that do that for women.
Okay. But still, somebody has to say to that woman that she's not allowed to get an abortion.
And
I think
this is a problem because I think that with the culture we have right now, it would be almost impossible to ban it. We need to essentially reform the culture. The fact of the matter is that before about 1965, there just wasn't demand for abortions.
Yep.
There's how many abortions? There's about like 1.5 million abortions in this country a year. Like 1.5 million abortions.
Yep.
That's like a very, very large percentage of that's like 20%. That's like 1/5 of the number of live births in this country.
But do you think women who do it are committing murder?
I mean, they're killing other humans. I don't consider the doctors who perform abortions to be murderers in the same way I don't consider soldiers that shoot people in war to be murderers. It's an extraordinary circumstance, but they are functionally killing human beings.
And so there shouldn't be like well, I guess there'll be like prison sentence or punishment for.
I don't believe in prison sentences for and nobody in the pro-life movement does, except for Donald Trump because he's an idiot.
Well, I'm just trying to think of
on that too. Nobody wants to throw women in jail. Nobody wants to, everybody wants the best for everybody. We don't want to throw women in jail.
So you are saying it's just kind of like you want a cultural shift of some kind.
I want a cultural shift, and I want government power to facilitate that cultural shift.
Government power to facilitate that. So
yes.
That would be government banning abortions or whatever.
I would say government phasing out abortions slowly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that the main thing that I find
like second and third trimester, right? Like, can we agree on that?
The main thing
why is anyone having that?
Well, I don't agree with late term abortions anyway.
Okay, so we can start by trying to have government crack down on those abortions, right?
Yeah, because I think at a certain point it's like too late. You've got to accept what's happened. And I think at that point it's like, well, you should have gotten it earlier.
But now all we're doing is just arguing over where the line should be, right? We've agreed that we can actually make the choice. We've agreed that we can illegalize it in some cases, and we're just arguing in what cases we can illegalize it.
Totally.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome because that's what the pro-life movement has been fighting for, is this idea that we can impose any restriction on a because I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's because of Roe v. Wade and Casey versus Planned Parenthood, there's functionally no restriction that can be placed on abortion in this country. Yeah. Period.
But I would still want it to be available prior to that line that you can just figure out just using general common sense, I suppose.
Can you? I'm not so sure.
It's difficult. It's not a simple thing, But I do think that a few months in, I don't think you're particularly killing a human. I think you're killing a future human, sort of. I think a fetus is like a human potential. It's a collection. It's basically it's the map of a future human, basically.
No, I mean not really. I mean it's a human in any biological sense of the word.
Yeah, but it's not formed.
Neither is a
It's
1 year old.
it's forming.
Uh,
Yeah, but
but
it's
no,
but
no,
it's still like
a baby is still forming too.
right.
So
I know,
okay, so
but I'm just saying at a certain.
is a baby not a human, but just the plan to be a human?
Well, it's a human, but it's a plan to be an adult, isn't it? It's just the next stage.
Why isn't a baby a plan to be? Why is the fetus not a human, but just a plan to be a human? But a baby is a human in its own right. I
Because
never
I would
understood that.
because I would say that the baby's senses are more developed at that point. That's
I
the thing. Is I think
guess.
at that very early stage,
Which senses in
um,
particular are we talking about?
what's that?
Which senses are we talking about?
Well, the ability to feel pain and have emotions, and you know,
Oh, that's questionable. I mean, we're talking that develops fairly early in fetal development, the ability to
yeah,
feel pain. Uh, so I mean, like,
yeah.
and not only that, right?
But
Like
you see, that's the thing.
the
It's a
ability to feel pain can
philosophical
be taken away
discussion.
from people, right? What?
Well, it's kind of a philosophical discussion in many ways, and that's why I think it's a bit of an assumption to be like that is straight up murder in the traditional sense. But you're killing something, you know. So there is a loss there, obviously, because there's a future human is not going to be there to live. So obviously, abortion is not something that you should take lightly.
No, I mean, I guess I wish more feminists would work with the pro-life movement to agree that abortion is a bad thing and we need to reduce it.
I think they just think there's not really alternatives except lots of unwanted babies. I know, like in an ideal world, maybe in your ideal world, there'd be adoption agencies being supported by the government, and it would be really wonderful. But I
Well, I
think
mean, can I ask
progressives
you
and
a
stuff.
question? Why do you
Yeah,
think we had such an increase in unwanted children um, starting in 1960? Right? I mean, like, there was almost no demand for abortion. I mean, the demand for abortion was minuscule before the early 60s.
it's just the cultural thing you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually what I'm concerned about more than whether abortion is legal or not.
Yeah, but you
Because
know
if
what? Effective, high quality, good birth control actually helps. So
it hasn't helped in the past,
if people use birth control, they don't get pregnant.
what are you talking about? Look at the history of this. In
Hmm.
1960, there's almost no demand for abortions, and there was no birth control. Or like, we have very bad. I said this before. This is projection, but if we use the projection that we have from British studies and combine it with American studies, we see that there's very, very, very few abortions prior to like 1955,
Hmm.
right? So we're
Yeah.
talking about a society that had almost no abortions. We
Yeah.
introduced birth control, and suddenly we have 1.5 million abortions a year. How did
What?
birth control lower the number of abortions?
Wait,
It
are you saying that
coincides with the largest increase of them historically.
are you saying the sexual revolution was started by birth control or
Birth
whatever?
control? Yes, I am. I Does anyone disagree with that?
Google this now. Sexual revolution known as sexual liberation. Sexual liberation.
Revolution.
Oh, the normalization of contraception and the pill, public nudity, pornography, premarital sex,
Yes.
homosexuality. Homosexuality? What? Alternative forms of sexuality and
Well,
legalization of abortion. Oh, all followed. Okay.
it definitely started by the pill. No
Right.
pill, no sexual revolution. That's very simple.
Well, but also sexual education was a lot poorer back then.
What do you mean?
Um,
I mean,
well, I mean, in the sexual revolution, they weren't fully educated about like the side effects of the things that they were doing. I wouldn't
they didn't
say.
know that sex made babies. I mean, I
Well, I mean,
think
they
they
barely
did.
they barely even
They
knew
knew
about
that,
like
right?
STDs, for example.
Well,
You know,
yeah. I mean,
they
people knew
barely
about
knew
that.
they barely knew that like, and up through like the 70s and 80s, everyone was giving each other diseases, and they didn't even know that,
I
and
mean, but
AIDS and everything. And, yeah.
this is further a case why the sexual revolution was so terrible. I mean,
But what do you want to do? Do you want to go back in time and stop that from happening?
I don't want to go back in time, no.
Because I
And then we
think
can
people having
recognize
sex
when
is
bad
a good
things
thing.
happen, though.
People having sex is a good, healthy thing.
I
Um,
agree.
you just have to be careful
Ha-
about how you do it, you know?
Having, well, I guess, I mean, having sex and giving people diseases and having sex and killing the child that you produce. I'm not so sure.
But when used properly, birth control can be a way of preventing spreading disease and
Statistically, though, it's like 99% effective. That means, 1 out of 100 times it's not. I mean,
right.
there's a reason why we have these high
But
abortion rates
if you,
coincide with the introduction of birth control.
I think part of the issue is that humans are irresponsible, and I don't think it's necessarily a political or social or cultural thing. Part of it's biological, just the desire to have sex means that people make bad decisions.
Mhm.
And I don't know what amount of trying to change the culture could make people not make bad decisions, unless you had some foolproof form of birth control. But I don't know. Some forms of birth control are pretty good. I mean, the pill's not too bad. If you combine the pill and condoms, there's not very much chance that you're gonna get
Well,
pregnant.
but I mean, this is, this is, but this is the problem. There's very little chance that you will get pregnant. There's a very high chance that somebody will.
Hmm.
Because we don't think in terms of statistically well, right? Like,
Yep.
this is the big lie behind this thing is it didn't control birth. It just turned an actual problem into a statistical problem, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, this is,
But I mean, do you think if the pill had never been introduced, that some kind of sexual revolution wouldn't have happened, given
if there had been
how?
no pill, okay, unless there was a better, okay, I'm not saying that pill it had to be a progesterone based birth control pill, but
Hmm.
if there was no birth control, there would have been no sexual revolution. I guarantee it.
Yeah,
I
but
guarantee it.
people still want to have sex though, and they
Yeah, but that's why they
wouldn't have the
don't have
pill.
sex for what?
They just wouldn't have the pill.
What do you think
And
happened before 1960?
well, I think society itself was a lot different,
Well,
because
yeah, it was
it was
before the
much
sexual
more,
revolution.
yeah, it was
What?
much more conservative in general, and they had the nuclear family and everything.
Well, the nuclear family was, I mean, they had the extended family. That was the nuclear family isn't traditional. The extended family is traditional.
Yeah,
Yeah, and but I support the extended and nuclear families. I think that's an important thing to preserve. And I
yeah.
think that when people what
No, I just said yep.
yeah, I mean, I mean, we also have these studies about like people are less happier now than they. I mean, we have this paradox that women in particular are much less happy than they were in previous eras, which is interesting. I'm not so sure what causes it, but that's neither here nor there.
Hmm.
But I mean, I don't know. To me, it seems strange, right? You have, I mean, especially in places like the African American community, right? Like, we've essentially introduced problems to the community that, like, this massive fatherlessness, and then we're just like, okay, well, I guess we're people. Most African American children aren't going to know their father. I mean,
Hmm.
that's terrible. Like,
Right, but I mean, what is the solution there, in your
okay,
opinion?
first of all, I guess we should. I mean, some people don't recognize it as terrible. I guess. I mean, the solution is this is a good question, actually. As a feminist, do you believe that cultural change can be procured somehow? Like, can we like? Obviously, Jonathan McIntosh is trying to change video games so that
Yeah,
society becomes less sexist. Could
yeah.
I try to change media so that society would become more invested in making sure that children are raised with their father?
I think it's a matter of involvement, like who is involved in the video games industry, who is involved in the media,
You
who's
think
making the
that
decisions. That's how change comes about, is certain people influencing media. But that's the thing. If Josh McIntosh is just making his videos, but he's not affecting any change because there aren't people like him designing games, then it's just kind of pointless.
But
Because
let's say
yeah,
people were designing games. Do you think that would be a good avenue to confront sexism?
what video games?
I don't know, just any media in general. I'm just curious if you think that cultural change can be cured in this way.
Well, I don't know because I mean, don't you want a kind of cultural change just in a conservative direction?
I do, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just two sides of a different coin, right? Like feminists trying to influence things and conservatives being like, "No, it's gone too far.
Well,
Bring it back a bit."
this is another thing. I have no investment in the status quo, right?
Yeah.
Like, you guys can pedal to the metal all you want because this current
Mm.
status quo culture we're in, I've got like zero investment in. So
Like
the
a
idea that
poster
I'm
boy.
trying to
Yeah.
conserve something that's why I hate the word conservative. I know I used it at the beginning, but I mean, it's a terrible descriptor of me because I don't believe I'm conserving jack shit.
Well,
You know,
it sounds like I don't know if traditional values is the right word, but you've got certain values which are associated with
yeah,
conservatism.
traditional values is a much better word, right?
Yeah, but it does conjure up an image of like out of touch people who can't keep up with modern society, and they're just they're like we want our old ways back. We want our sweater vests and our
I
fucking
mean,
old
but
Ford
I
T
guess,
models.
do you consider having children raised with their father to be like, part of this mockable night? And everyone's going up to this 1950s culture. I mean, we can never get over this culturally. We're still mocking fashions like sweater vests that were popular in the 1950s.
Yeah, sorry, it's
I
fine.
know it's not progressive's fault entirely because people like Rick Santorum keep these mockable traditions alive.
Yeah.
Um, uh, uh, but fundamentally, I mean, do you want fathers to be put into the category of ridiculous old-fashioned things that nobody does anymore?
No, but I just think I just believe people should be whoever they want to be, and if that meant that, I don't
Jonathan
know,
McIntosh does not believe that.
but if like every second person was gay or
He's
something, I
he
mean, I
doesn't
wouldn't
believe that.
give a fuck. Like, who cares? But I also want society to be fair, and I want it to be stable, and I want it to be a good place, obviously. So there can be sometimes a conflict between like new values and um trying to find a way of making that fit with society. Like that can be a struggle. Change can be difficult for people, and it can have difficult side
Yeah,
effects. Like for
but
example, like us talking about the sexual revolution and the pill. I
yes.
think in the aggregate, I would prefer a society in which people can express themselves sexually, but at the same time, there's a lot of negative aspects to that, like sexually transmitted disease, and there could be some side effects like broken homes, for example. So I
But
think everything is a pro and con. It's give and take, and it's hard to find the exact right
what's the pro I'm
place.
getting? What's the pro I'm getting for a large majority of children not being raised by fathers? Um, declining marriage rates to the point where if this increases, no one's going to get married anymore, and
But what?
people
But what are you blaming
what
that on? Like, what are you blaming this on?
this is the consequence of the sexual revolution.
Well, I mean, the pro would be sexual expression. You
When
know?
people express themselves, they especially express themselves to one partner. There's monogamy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sexual expression, like, I mean, come on. I mean, this is another thing too. This is maybe you can help me understand this. I never understood this about. I guess like I used to be a progressive, so I kind of do, right?
Yeah.
But this idolization of like sexual appetite and like this making it sacred, right? Like I'm trying to think of like what would if I had like an unlimited ability to express myself sexually, right? Like
Mhm.
what kind of crazy sex would I have? Well, I don't freaking know, right? But at the same time, I know like that's not really, I think, a pertinent question, right?
It
Because I
depends.
think that
It depends solely on what kind of person you are, to be honest.
no, I think that largely it would change, right? Because if I were, first of all, I mean, I believe ethically that monogamy is the only legitimate sexual pattern.
Hmm.
Um, Now, I mean, but I think that if I just let myself go and went like, oh, whatever crazy thing, I think that I would just like develop all sorts of crazy sexualities, just out of boredom eventually,
Well,
right?
look, I'm super vanilla myself, and I don't have any like crazy fetishes or fantasies or whatever. I just think I don't care if anybody else does, and I guess in that sense I can relate to libertarians because they're like I don't really give a shit either.
See, I don't give a shit, but I do give a shit about monogamy. And so if you're
Why?
saying if you're
I care about
saying that
monogamy from my partner, but in terms of anybody else's decision, I'm like, do what you want.
well, no, I care about monogamy as a societal standard, and for one reason, children.
Yeah,
I mean, like
yeah.
everyone's like, oh well, monogamy, whatever you want to do, and then like fatherless children everywhere. Like so,
Right.
if I don't
No,
give a fuck
but you
about
see,
sexual,
the progressive answer to that would be providing, um, you know, investment in education and
but,
the welfare
a
system
daycare is
and
not
ways
going
of
to
trying to
make up. Daycare is not going to make up for a broken home. It's not.
what isn't
Daycare is not going to make up for a broken home.
not just daycare,
Oh,
but
good,
like
really good daycare. What else is there?
heavy investment in public education.
Public education and daycare is not going to make up for a broken home.
It's going to help.
I didn't say it wouldn't help. It's going to be a band-aid over a massive scar.
Free
And
college,
first of all, free college is in the abstract a stupid idea.
free stuff for everybody.
This is
I'm
the
only
thing,
half
like,
joking.
yeah, I know you're only half joking, but this is the thing. Like, you take away organic things that people actually need, and then you toss them a like lollipop, right?
Yeah, but it also sounds like you're it sounds like you're
Candy bar.
thinking of some kind of utopia of some kind where just everybody goes back to living this perfect, family life and they don't have to rely on the government for anything. And
Family life isn't perfect. No, I'm asking for people. I'm saying that family life is important to me and it's important to children.
I think
I,
it is obviously important, but one way of helping create that is through societal stability, which involves investment in communities and actually trying to like lift people up by actually caring about them as human
no, but
beings.
that can't replace. Well, first of all, nobody cares less about human beings than gigantic government finance bureaucracies. And that's the whole point. Like the family actually cared about people, and these like
Hmm.
departments of education just frankly don't.
I'm not sure what you mean by large financial bureaucracies don't care about people. What do you
They
mean?
don't. I mean, the people, government-run daycare doesn't care about people.
Well, they do provide them with daycare, don't they? So isn't it the
Sure, but
matter of them
my
caring is
point is,
irrelevant? Like, who
my,
cares whether they care? They just have to provide daycare.
what I said. My problem is that what you're taking away, what people lost is not is people lost more than what you're providing to give them, than what you're proposing to give them. Even in the best possible situation where you can give people like super crashes,
Hmm.
the fact that this change has robbed people of a fundamental family structure will hurt more than whatever you give them back in terms
But
of
but I'd still
pressures.
ask, like, how do you get them back to that place? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Cultural change.
So you do Josh McIntosh stuff.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I think that he has one right.
So you're just saying that Josh McIntosh is actually the right way to go for some
No,
reason.
I think Josh McIntosh is very misguided in terms of what he's focusing on, right?
You just need a conservative Josh McIntosh. Like, hey
Well,
guys, I want to talk to you today about the family. The family's great.
yeah, I'd look a lot less dorky than that, right?
Yeah.
You know?
This is great new game. It's called Traditional Family
Oh,
Simulator.
good lord, that would be terrible, wouldn't it? That's what would ruin video games for sure, is to put the Christian right in front of them. No, I mean, I don't know. I guess the question. I mean, I think that certain communities pursue this idea in the abstract, right?
Hmm.
And maybe well, conservatives tend to have more children, so maybe that's just going to take over naturally, right?
I thought Latinos were taking over America.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. The birth rates kind of drop off after the first few generations, especially if they're secular. The super Catholic ones keep on going though. So
it's not the last call for white people yet.
Perhaps if you're in Europe, but not really in America.
I'm not going to get into Muslims, are we?
You can get immigration. I mean, that's another thing that Sargon talks a lot about is Islamic immigration into Europe, which is, I mean, that's somewhat concerning, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd be concerned about it if I were in Europe, I guess.
I
mean,
but anyways, like, I don't think I'm really the best person, honestly, to talk to about feminism, for example. Like my friend Garrett knows a lot more about feminism than I do, but I can talk about like progressive values much better, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about it sort of with the whole abortion and sexual revolution thing. I think that's very primary in the progressive mind. And in my mind,
I can sum up progressivism quite simply, and it's basically just that which is practically seen to move society forward. So I think progressivism is very practically minded, in my opinion. But I also think that leads to a lot of conflict because, for example, well, like a good example would be, and to be fair, some conservatives are against this too, like the burkini ban in France, for example.
I'm incredibly against that.
Yeah, I know. I think everyone's against that, but I think things like
Christy Winters made a video for it, like a few weeks ago,
odd.
Which was like arguing that people should ban the burqa and stuff like that. And I'm like,
I would say that's not progressive, in my opinion, because I think not just that specific situation, but things like that. Progressives look at that and say that's practically not useful. It's not going to lead forward. It's not going to
forward to what?
Well, forward to a greater integration of Muslims with society and a greater tolerance between different people, that it's just going to lead things backwards, And I think progressives always think in terms of what leads us to a better place. But I guess, people disagree with what they think leads to a better place, but often I
would disagree with the better place, right? Because in my ideal place, we'd have a society where people were much more family oriented and much less oriented towards like large corporate bureaucracies.
But I think progressives would say that is impractical, because that would be kind of utopian, going back to something that is not there anymore.
You're the one that's attaching the back and forward. Nothing I said had the back and forward to it.
No, but I'm just trying to describe.
You're saying that forward can. What you're saying is that going forward, we can only ever have less family orientation.
No.
Okay, then why couldn't we go forward and have more family orientation?
Because it would be a question of whether that's a practical goal, if it's achievable, and if it's logical.
I mean, it's practical. I mean, like, we've discussed a number of problems, and none of the progressive solutions have worked. So what's ultimately practical, I guess, right? It's like totally eliminating racism practical? Probably not, right? It's totally eliminating sexism practical.
Wait, what progressive solutions to things that didn't work were you talking about?
Affirmative action didn't work.
Oh, right.
It's totally eliminating racism practical. No, right?
But it's
not. But it's still a progressive goal, right?
Yeah, but how would not trying to eliminate racism be practical either?
Well, not doing something is always practical because you're not doing anything. It's easy not to do anything.
But then why the hell they have like civil rights and shit?
What?
Why they have civil rights and that kind of thing?
That wasn't my question. My question was, what is when it comes to practicality, right? We're talking about. I mean,
practicality means doing something. It means doing something to try. It doesn't mean waving a magic wand and making racism go away. It means doing what you can to try and reduce it.
So why couldn't you do what you can to make people more family oriented?
I suppose you could.
So you could go forward to a more family oriented future.
But I think the problem there is when I just think of like intersectionality, for example, that progressives might see that as not beneficial to certain minorities who in the past, under like a family system, did not flourish.
Who did not flourish?
Like African Americans.
Wait, what? African Americans have been the chief. African Americans have suffered the most from the decline in families of any group in this country. They're the ones who have suffered when their families were broken up under slavery, and they're the ones that suffered in the 60s and 70s when their families were broken up in the drug war and sexual revolution.
But they weren't flourishing in like the 40s and 50s.
The black family was what? That was the only way they. That's the only way they. That's the only way they survived. Most of the stuff they got was from their families.
But I think that what progressives would want would be them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet in society because they have as many opportunities.
On their own 2 feet means this is what's bizarre. So standing on your own 2 feet means not having a family, but with massive affirmative action programs that give you, a separate standard than other races for getting into college and in certain jobs.
Well, it would be a matter of whether they have the equality of opportunity, and whether if they work just as hard as anybody else, they have equal opportunity to succeed rather than a stacked playing field. And I think that's basically the way that it's posited by progressives, I think.
But
I think own 2 feet is the wrong way to put it. That was the wrong terminology.
But I just don't understand what the black community has gained from the total destruction of their families.
Well, I would say things wouldn't have been rosy for them before that either. And I think that's the thing is...
what do you mean? Like you couldn't imagine a post-civil rights America where the black family was intact?
Oh, no, I was talking about like pre-civil rights.
But civil rights didn't destroy the black family. The drug war and the sexual revolution did.
Yeah. Well, I fully agree with you on the drug war. So,
and the sexual revolution, that's undeniable as well. I mean, that's it did the whole thing in. I mean, but this is one of the things the fact that the black community has these destroyed families is one of the biggest things holding the community back. And I don't know how you get around it, right? Like,
yeah. I honestly think this is one of those subjects that I need to read more on, to be honest. So, like, do you have any recommendations of things that I could read? Or
sure. If you want to read on the black community, on their family problem, well, there's a lot of old stuff, right? A lot of black conservatives have stuff on this. Shelby Steele and Thomas Sowell are the 2 primary examples. If there's like a more neutral version, the Moynihan report was obviously the original one of these things.
I would be concerned that they were too biased in a conservative direction because that they were just trying to like push a narrative as opposed to just say the facts.
Can I ask you a question? If that's true with reading conservative authors, then why shouldn't I doubt all sociological studies?
Are all of them liberals?
What?
All of them liberals, would you say?
Yes, are actually.
I think it's fair.
1,000-to-1 ratio of sociologists, liberals to conservatives.
Well, no, I actually think it's fair to be cynical of the reasons why somebody might be saying something.
I am quite cynical of sociological studies for just that reason. I try to actually look at them in depth and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean,
as a left winger and a progressive, I guess.
What?
As a left winger and a progressive, I guess I'm just more wary because I've seen a lot of Fox News, so that's probably the reason.
Yeah, but I've seen university campuses, and that's like, they're ridiculous. I mean, the affirmative consent. I know we're coming up on our time period, but like affirmative consent, and this is something as a conservative Catholic that absolutely positively does not affect me, because I believe in sort of this really old-fashioned version of affirmative consent called monogamy, right? But I understand how it was not being a Catholic in the past. And affirmative consent makes zero sense to me. And the fact that this is propounded and supported by college administrators is evidence that people have gone totally insane.
Is this yes means yes or whatever?
Yes. No,
Yes.
it's the idea that at every escalation of a sexual encounter, there has to be an affirmative consent, like an
Yeah,
explicit affirmative consent.
I actually think that's ridiculous. So it
But
doesn't
but
make
so how
sense.
did they get it passed? How does this now the de facto rule in all American universities? It's because like there's no ideological control. I mean, I don't watch Fox News, and I'm sure there's insane people saying insane things there. But I mean, there's insane people saying things on like virtually every single college campus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I said I'm less tied to a lot of this cultural stuff, to be honest. And I care more often about like the politics and stuff. Like that's what I pay more attention to, because I think
Yeah.
that kind of thing is a bit kind of like liberalism run amok, to be honest. Because I mean, what about nonverbal cues? That's probably the biggest thing when you're having sex. Like
But
if
nonverbal
somebody,
cues is no longer affirmative consent.
I know, but to me that doesn't make sense. Like if you're having sex with someone and they wince or they go, then you'll be like, hey, are you okay? You
Yeah,
know?
I mean,
And then it'd
this is
say,
the problem. I mean, to me, this is people trying to deal with the consequences of the sexual revolution, right? Like,
hmm,
a lot of men are in the old-fashioned traditional circle. There'd be a word for what's happening to these women, and that word would be they're being taken advantage of, right?
what woman?
The women who are experiencing these bad experiences in colleges, right?
Hmm,
Like for say
right.
Emma Solkowitz or someone like that, right?
Yeah.
Do you know Emma Solkowitz?
No, maybe.
The
I don't know.
mattress that she like carried this mattress around
Oh,
Columbia.
yep, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Like Sergen's did multiple videos on her. Like, this is the thing, right? Like, so I'm people are asking me to believe that Emma Solkowitz was raped. But there's not a lot of evidence that she was. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that she wasn't. But
What evidence that she wasn't? What do you mean?
what? Oh
What
yeah.
evidence?
So she solicited sex from the person who's supposed to have raped her multiple times after the rape occurred.
So,
Um,
what does that
well,
prove?
that's proof that she didn't believe that she was raped that night.
What do you mean? Well, like, Rihanna or whatever, she got the shit bit out of her by Chris Brown. She still went back to him. So that just, she could just be kind of messed up in her head. It doesn't mean she wasn't raped the first time. She
Okay,
might have
so
been.
this also went to a committee that had a preponderance of evidence standard, which is the lowest form of evidence, and the guy was acquitted. So basically, she couldn't even show a preponderance of evidence that this had occurred.
Okay.
So the reason why, look, ordinarily, why is it my business whether this person was raped? Because I'm literally asked,
Yeah.
like, to confirm that this rape happened, and at the meantime, what's your opinion on Bill Clinton?
In what area? He's
This
a
is a
guy.
person.
He's a smooth talker,
Do
and
you consider
his
him a
speech
rapist?
at the DNC was boring as fuck.
Do you consider
And
Bill
I
Clinton a rapist?
I don't. Who did he rape? But Lewinsky.
Several women. No, he didn't rape Lewinsky. Several women have accused him of raping them,
He
and their
could be.
stories are way more convincing than Emma Solkowitz's.
All I could say to that would be, I don't know. He could be. Yeah. Just like she could have been raped, or she might not have. I don't know. So I just
Yeah, but
keep it
like
neutral because I don't fucking know.
I would like to be neutral, but the problem is I'm asked to make these calls, right?
Yeah.
My impression is, and this is also
Yeah.
a problem with this is another one of my issues in this whole rape culture thing.
Hmm.
Ordinarily, I'd like to make absolutely no judgments over who's raped or who's not. I'm not a jury member, right?
Yeah.
But these people like Emma Solkowitz and the Rolling Stones case and all these other people, they're being brought to my attention, and then I'm being asked to say, yes, this occurred, right? Or no, that never occurred, right?
Yeah.
Like Hillary Clinton is asking me to believe that, you know, the women who accused Bill Clinton of raping them are liars. And Emma
Yeah.
Salkowitz is asking me to endorse the fact that not only, the people in Colombia unjustly dismissed her rape claim.
But what's wrong with saying you don't know?
I don't. I mean, I don't know. Is they're asking me to participate in this, right?
Mhm.
Like that's like. So you want a I don't know from. I mean, when
No,
would this
I'm just saying
not be? I don't know.
if somebody asked me if Bill Clinton raped those women, I'd be like, I don't know.
So look,
But
I'll
it
put
is
it this I'll
possible
put
to
it this way.
say.
I'll
It
put
is
it this
possible to
way.
say it
So
looks bad for him. It's likely.
so
Maybe
nearby to where I am right now, there was this swimmer. You might have heard of him. I forget what his name was, but he totally date raped this girl in Stanford
Oh, that guy!
area.
I made a video about him, Brock
Yeah,
Turner.
Brock. That's him. Is it Brock someone or another? Right?
I made
Like,
a video
okay,
about
but
him.
you
Yeah,
not know whether he raped somebody.
him. Do I know
Yes.
whether he raped somebody?
Yes.
The evidence. Well, I mean, like even just in a criminal trial, you don't know for sure whether something happened, but you can just say that it seems like he probably did based on the evidence that I've seen.
Yeah, I'd say that's right. I would agree with you.
But I don't
He
know for
definitely
sure.
raped
I
that.
can't say for sure. Well, I can't say for sure. I just think he
I mean,
probably
I
did.
can't say anything for sure, I guess, right? I mean, like, we
Yeah.
may not have landed on the moon and the Holocaust might not have happened. And yeah, I mean, who knows, right? Like anything.
Well, no,
What?
because we absolutely know for sure the Holocaust happened, unless the people who went there were just like going to, I don't know, they were in a magical cloud. They went there, they saw the bodies, they took videos. No, that
No,
definitely
that
happened.
wasn't a serious. That wasn't a serious. No, I'm this thing. I think you're. That wasn't a serious. I wasn't inviting a debate on the Holocaust. That was me being facetious.
Oh, okay. No, but I'm just saying it's not comparable to the Brock Turner rape because that just had two witnesses and the girl. And conceivably, I don't know, they were all lying or something, but I don't think they were. So I think he's probably guilty.
Yeah, I guess I'm. I
But when
don't
it comes to like
know.
the Holocaust, it's on video. Everyone, like a bajillion people saw it. So,
Well, you're surprised though, right? Like, I totally believe the Holocaust happened and everything like that, but a lot of these conspiracy theories or historical revisionist things, you'd
yeah,
be surprised how little evidence there is for any given historical circumstance, right?
I've seen the videos of the Holocaust though, where they all like fabricated.
But the videos, well, okay, first of all, I want to be clear to the chat, Holocaust totally happened, but I mean, what videos are you talking about, right?
Well, there's videos of them at the camps with all the
Sure.
bodies there, and they're looking at the bodies, and they're like,
Oh,
"These
you
are
mean
all."
okay, but yeah, but I'm just trying to demonstrate how, if you were arguing against an alt-right or neo-fash person, this
Yeah.
would be a much more difficult argument than you might imagine, right? Um, okay, well, I talk to these people, maybe you don't,
Mm.
but that was totally immaterial to my point. I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding with a lot of these conversations is like what progressives really want. Like for me it's very difficult ultimately, and this is, I guess we're kind of winding this up a little bit.
Mhm.
As a conservative, it's very difficult for me to feel like I can compromise or come to some agreement with progressives, because there's this impression on the right, and I think among people like Sargon as well,
Yeah.
that um, that you can never make a deal with progressives because it will be sort of it, there'll be this Darth Vader, like they'll modify the deal later. There's no limiting principle to what they want, right?
I don't know what you're referring to though.
So
Like, what
for
do you mean?
instance, I'll give you an example, right? For instance, I'm fairly sure that progressives want the Catholic hospitals to perform abortions, right?
Hmm. Do
I
they?
think they want this. Well, they don't. They say they don't, right? But they say they don't want a lot of things, right? What?
That's just like mind reading. Like fucking Sargon read my mind, you know?
No, but like,
He said I was a liar. And I'm like, you fucking dick. I made a mistake. I didn't lie. But he kept calling me a liar. And then I was like, how come you can read my fucking mind and you know? I don't get that.
well, so the thing is, I don't know what your argument is with Sargon specifically,
Oh, we've got
but
lots of them. Don't worry.
okay, but the thing is, the difficulty I have with so for instance, like there is an agreement in American politics that we wouldn't force the Catholic Church to do things against its conscience. There would be strong conscience protections, right? And we had a law called RFRA,
Yeah.
which basically extended the First Amendment protections of liberty to make them very, very robust against government incursions. And I can explain the law in detail if you like, because I'm a huge proponent of it. But then after Obamacare was passed and we gave the government power to essentially ask companies to pay for medical things, against his own promise, President Obama went and forced Catholics to pay for sterilization, abortion, and contraception coverage in their healthcare plans. Which, so I mean, like, so he says one thing and then the next thing he does another, right? Like, you know, just like this whole thing with, like, I was a huge opponent of the Iraq War, and it just, like, you know, I could kind of tell what was going on even when, like, I was seeing it, right? Like, I knew that Bush wanted to invade Iraq because he felt that he was going to totally remake the Middle East in his own, you know, he was gonna make the Middle East democratic, and that's why he wanted to invade Iraq, right? As this, you know, and this whole weapons of mass destruction was just a cover, right? I can kind of sense that. I know it sounds like bullshit, right? Like, and you could feel free to dismiss me, but it seems like this progressive line I'm getting is also bullshit.
Right. Well, I do think, well, at least when it comes to conservatives and government, that progressives would definitely feel the same about that. That just like conservatives are always trying to put roadblocks in front of things. And I think the thing about Obamacare and abortion is a valid concern. But I also think a lot of progressives and left-wingers think that Republicans were arguing in bad faith about healthcare overall anyways, like just when they were trying to actually come up with the law, they were just trying to get in the way of it and distract because they hate Obama, you know?
What bad faith things did Republicans claim about the Obamacare law?
Well, for example, how the law itself is basically, I forgot where it came from, it was like the American Enterprise Institute or something, which was basically like the government mandating private health insurance as opposed to some kind of single payer.
But it did mandate private health insurance. So that's the truth.
Yeah, and that, but that was, yeah, but that was a Republican idea. It was come up with like the American Enterprise Institute or something like that. There was a right-wing think tank that came up with that idea.
So the Republicans were telling the truth in 2010. You're just blaming older Republicans from like the 90s for coming up with this idea.
Well, that they were against their own idea.
Something a bad idea?
No, they're basically against their own idea.
Whose idea? Like the American Enterprise Institute isn't, like, one think tank in the American Enterprise Institute doesn't speak for the entire conservative movement.
Yeah, but I think the perception is that Republicans were doing absolutely nothing to work with Obama. They just wanted to like destroy whatever it is he came up with.
I think they actually didn't like the bill because everything they said would happen has happened now.
Like what?
Like premiums going up, like large healthcare networks pulling out of the exchanges, like people losing their plans if they're not platinum plans. All three of those things have happened.
They don't have a fucking alternative at all.
It doesn't matter. They're fundamentally, the bottom line is that I mean, I hate to say this because I don't like Republicans very much, even though I quote unquote conservative. I think the Republicans are scum. They're as shitty as the Democrats say they are. The problem is the Democrats are shittier. But as much as I hate Republicans or hate the current Republican Party, they were telling the truth in 2010 when they were going after Obamacare, because all three of their critiques are in the process or have already happened. Premiums are higher, and healthcare providers are dropping out of the exchanges. And
Well, that's
people
why they
lost
should have
their
got single
plans.
payer, shouldn't they?
What?
That's why they should have got single payer.
Well, yeah, but there's problems with implementing single payer in the present system, right?
By the way, I was wrong. It was Heritage Foundation in
Okay, but it
1980.
doesn't matter. It's immaterial. I don't care which think. For one think tank and one conservative institute doesn't somehow bind the entire Republican Party, right?
Right, but they are generally often behind their think tanks.
What? No.
Republicans. You're saying
No.
like their think tanks are not highly influential in the way they think? I think they are.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're telling the truth about what Obamacare would accomplish in 2010. I mean,
but you said it's not relevant for them to have an alternative.
well, I think that. What do you mean? Like, because so like you can't be against something. So for instance, like this is like if Bush is like, I'm going to invade Iraq, right, to like stop America from getting attacked by terrorists, and then like, and then you're like, well, that's a shitty idea because it's going to cause all this destabilization. And then Bush is like, well, what's your strategy for ending terrorism once and for all? Well, no, I don't need to have like a strategy for ending terrorism once and for all to know that invading Iraq is going to end terrorism once and for all, you know?
But I would argue that after 9/11, you would be expected to come up with something.
But that's the whole, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened, right? They're like, I literally got that same argument, right? They're like, but no, like, just because like you're the fact that I don't have a plan doesn't make your shitty plan good. It doesn't even make it better than the status quo. Like America would have been better doing nothing than invading Iraq.
Okay.
Doing nothing was a better thing to do than invading Iraq.
Yeah. Wait, okay. So you're saying the status quo would be not invading Iraq in this situation?
Yes. And I'm in favor of the status quo of not invading Iraq in 2003.
Yeah, but then how are you going to deal with people going insane about terrorism? You have to do something about
it. This is an interesting thread that's gone through our conversation. I don't believe that people's perceptions of reality should guide policy. The fact of the matter is there's very little you can do to impact terrorism without trying to change Islam in some ways.
Well, I'm not saying that they therefore should have invaded Iraq. I'm saying that they should have done something smart.
What would that have been?
Not invading Iraq, but something else.
Okay, great, but that's exactly what I'll say with Obamacare, right? They should have done something else. Well, what? I don't know. Not Obamacare, but something else.
Single payer healthcare.
This is the thing you don't understand. It's almost impossible to institute single payer healthcare in this country. I mean, the reason there is a window when implementing single payer healthcare was possible, and that's on the European countries. You need to have a growing economy, a really fast growing economy, and you need to have a very, very young population, and we have neither of those.
Well, I think whatever the case, the American healthcare system is pretty shit. So
yeah. Okay. Well, hold on. We have to clarify here. It's shit at distribution, right? What it's not shit at is premium plans being good at dispensing care to people who have them.
Yeah. Well, it's just people not being able to afford healthcare and not having.
Yes.
Insurance.
But if you have healthcare in this country, you're much better off than any other place in the world.
But that reminds me a little bit of what Glenn Beck said once. I'm not comparing you to Glenn Beck. I'm just joking. But he was like the Speaker of the Parliament in Australia. He came to this country and he got healthcare. Therefore, we've got a great system. And it's like, and I just thought, well, wait a minute. The Speaker of the House of Australia is probably pretty rich.
It's funny. The thing, it's not. The whole point is it's not binary, right?
Yeah.
And this is what's really important to understand, right? The reason why it's almost impossible to implement single payer is because everybody who has these really nice healthcare plans is going to lose a lot of their coverage. Right? You're going to get people who are being treated for cancer suddenly losing their cancer treatments.
Yeah, but I think they're worried about the people that just don't have any coverage whatsoever in the first place, and there's a
I
lot of
know,
them.
which is why we need a unique solution for the particular place we are right now, right?
But I don't think it's those like health, what the fuck are they called, healthcare accounts or whatever. Private,
Exchanges.
no, private healthcare accounts or whatever. You know, where you put money into like a private
I
account.
think you're thinking of Social Security.
No, it's a conservative solution. I just forgot what the name is.
Uh,
Private healthcare. It's like a bank account where you put in money and it builds up over.
I think you're thinking of Social Security.
Nah,
It's,
like
private accounts is a proposal conservatives had for Social Security, not in my, because the whole idea is not to have a savings account for healthcare. The whole point is to buy insurance for healthcare.
yeah,
So the
medical
whole
savings account, health savings account. Yeah,
health
these
savings
things.
account. Okay,
I
well,
just googled it.
I haven't looked at those, but
I know Paul Ryan was doobling on about them a while ago.
well, I mean, maybe there's some clutch idea there, but I mean, fundamentally, fundamentally, I guess the problem is that people don't buy healthcare when they're well.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure. I think the solution is, frankly, is to have single payer catastrophic with some
Mm.
deductible, right? With a large deductible.
Yeah.
Then do everything else essentially through through the current system that we have, or through a reform system we have, such that we just massively deregulate it, right? So we put government in charge of the catastrophic with single payer, with the ability to essentially get improvements on that through private plans, and then we sort of take the upkeep care and make and reform that so that people can more easily exchange that on a market-based system. And I think that would be the solution in my
Yeah.
mind.
I'm probably too sleepy to understand everything you just said, but it
Yeah,
sounds
and
good.
I mean, it's super late here, but it was a really interesting conversation, though. I thought it was fascinating, man.
I'm not
Um,
sure I'm really on form today, so I'll
well,
probably
don't worry about
listen.
it. I
Yeah.
had a really good time. I always love debating people and arguing. So
I
thanks
don't
so
think I
much.
managed to
What?
justify the existence of feminism very well, so I'm sorry.
Oh no, don't worry about it. I hope we'll have more conversations like this, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be yelling at me in the chat for not bringing up some argument. Guys, it was like super late when I started this, so I wasn't thinking super well. But let's keep in contact. Thanks for coming on, man.
Cool.
Okay,
Thanks.
cheers. Bye.
Bye.